The cold morning air cut through the barren streets of West Ridge, Oregon. The sky was a muted gray, heavy with the promise of rain, and the wind whispered through the empty warehouse district. The warehouses here, long abandoned, had become little more than silent sentinels of forgotten industry, standing like ghosts of a once bustling area. Now only a few figures dared to tread here, and today it was Officer Leila Cortez and her K-9 partner, Duke. Leila adjusted the collar of her jacket as she stepped out of her patrol car, the gravel beneath her boots crunching with every step. Duke, her loyal German shepherd, stood by her side, his eyes sharp and his muscles taut, sensing the quiet unease of the place. There was something off about this particular warehouse, something that even the overcast sky couldn't quite explain. "Come on, buddy," Leila muttered to Duke as she opened the rusted metal door. "Let's see what we've got." Duke didn't move at first. He stood still, his ears twitching, his nose sniffing the air in small, deliberate movements. Leila paused, sensing his hesitation. "What's wrong?" she asked softly, crouching down to his level. "You smell something?" Duke's head turned toward the far corner of the warehouse, where a section of the concrete floor looked slightly worn. Nothing too unusual, but it seemed out of place. Leila stood up and motioned for him to follow. "All right, let's check it out." They walked deeper into the dimly lit space, the echoes of their footsteps bouncing off the cold, gray walls. The warehouse was silent, save for the occasional creak of the old structure shifting in the wind. As they neared the corner, Duke's behavior shifted. He started sniffing rapidly at the floor, his paws scraping lightly against the concrete. "Duke, what is it?" Leila asked, her voice more cautious now. The dog began to scratch at the floor with urgency, his teeth gritting in concentration. He growled low in his throat, a sound that always made Leila pause. Duke wasn't just scratching. It was as if he was trying to tear the floor apart. Leila knelt down, placing her hand on Duke's back. "Easy, boy. What's got you worked up?" Duke didn't stop. He seemed fixated, his focus so intense it sent a shiver down Leila's spine. Her hand tightened around his harness, a mix of curiosity and concern swirling inside her. This was different. This wasn't the normal search and scent routine. Duke had found something. She stood up and scanned the room. The warehouse was empty, the shadows deepening as the morning light struggled to penetrate the grime on the windows. The silence was thick, oppressive, and Leila couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone in this space. Even though there was no one here. "Something's not right," she murmured to herself. But just as she turned to walk away, Duke's scratching grew more frantic, his claws clicking louder against the concrete. His body was tense, his tail stiff with agitation. Leila's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just a random spot. Duke was trying to tell her something. Something had been hidden here, something that had set him off. "Okay, Duke," she said, her voice calm but firm. "We'll get some help." She reached for her radio and called in backup. "This is Officer Cortez. I need a unit for a possible discovery at the old warehouse on West Ridge. My K-9 partners found something unusual. Can you send a detective and a forensics team?" The radio crackled to life. "Copy that, Officer Cortez. We're sending someone over right now. Stay with your partner." Leila glanced down at Duke, whose focus never wavered. She could see the strain in his body as he continued to claw at the concrete. She bent down to his level again. "You're sure about this, aren't you?" she whispered, her voice soft and filled with awe. She had seen Duke do his job hundreds of times, but this felt different. Duke stopped suddenly, his gaze lifting to meet hers. He gave a soft whine, as if to confirm her suspicion. His dark eyes were filled with something she couldn't quite place. Maybe it was fear, or maybe it was something worse, something buried under that cold concrete. A few minutes later, the sound of another patrol car pulling up outside broke the silence. Detective Shepard, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for skepticism, stepped into the warehouse with a look of quiet annoyance on his face. "What's this about, Cortez?" he asked, his voice low and edged with doubt. He took in the scene, eyeing Duke and the intense focus the dog had on the floor. Leila didn't take her eyes off Duke. He's found something, detective. I think there's something under the floor. Shepard frowned. And you think your dog's sniffing out a dead body? Or what? Because the last time I checked, we don't get our leads from animals. Leila's jaw tightened, but she didn't back down. I've seen him do this before. He doesn't act like this unless something's there. I'm telling you, there's something hidden under the floor. The detective was silent for a moment, glancing down at Duke and then back at Leila. The doubt was still there, but something about the way Leila said it made him pause. All right, he said finally. Let's see what the dog's so worked up about. But if this turns out to be nothing, it won't be nothing, Leila interrupted quietly, her eyes never leaving the spot Duke had marked. Shepard nodded, his expression hardening as he stepped toward the area. Let's get to work. Leila felt a mixture of unease and anticipation as the team began their preliminary assessment. She could feel the tension growing, as if the warehouse was holding its breath, waiting for them to uncover whatever Duke had sensed. She stayed by Duke's side, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of his harness as she silently urged him to keep going. Whatever lay beneath the concrete, it was about to change everything. The air in the warehouse grew even colder as Detective Shepard moved closer to the spot Duke had been relentlessly scratching at. His boots scraped lightly against the concrete as he crouched down, eyeing the area where the dog had focused all his attention. He ran his fingers over the surface of the floor, tapping lightly to check for any unusual sounds. But the concrete felt solid, unyielding. All right, Cortez, Shepard muttered, standing up and brushing his hands together. This better not be a waste of time. We don't have all day. His tone was skeptical. His eyes narrowed in disbelief as he looked at the dog, still sitting motionless, eyes fixed on the floor. Leila didn't answer immediately. She could feel the growing sense of urgency in her chest. Duke's behavior had never been this intense before. She knew there was something here, something that would explain the strange unease that had settled over her ever since they stepped into the warehouse. She turned to the officer standing nearby. Get the team on the phone. I want a concrete cutter here now. If we're digging up a grave, we need to do it properly. Shepard sighed, rubbing his temples as he stared at Leila, clearly not convinced. You sure about this, Cortez? He asked, his voice dropping, now tinged with impatience. I mean, we could be wasting valuable resources on nothing. Leila glanced down at Duke, who was still staring intently at the same spot. His steady gaze sent a chill down her spine, but there was no doubting the certainty in his expression. The dog had a sixth sense, one that had never failed them before. Yeah, I'm sure, she said, her voice steady but firm. We need to do this right. If there's something down there, we need to find it. A moment of silence passed between them, the weight of the situation pressing down on them both. Shepard, still unsure, finally gave a slow nod. Fine. Get the cutter. I'll handle the rest. It wasn't long before a crew arrived with the necessary equipment. The sound of the concrete cutter's blades slicing through the air sent a shiver through the warehouse, and for the first time that day, Leila felt a sense of finality in the action. This wasn't just a search anymore. It was a full-blown investigation. As the cutter's blade began to buzz and grind against the concrete floor, Duke's posture didn't change. He remained perfectly still like a statue, focused on the same spot he had started with. Leila stood by him, keeping her hand on his back, her thoughts racing. Can you feel it too, boy? She whispered, more to herself than to him. Something's been hidden here. For how long? And why? The cutter's progress was slow but steady. Dust swirled in the air as the blades worked tirelessly, and the grinding noise filled the space. Shepard, standing back with his arms crossed, eyed the situation with growing skepticism, but even he couldn't deny the palpable tension in the air. Something was happening. Leila glanced over at him. What do you think? She asked, her voice low, almost a challenge. He sighed. I still think we're chasing a ghost here, Cortez. But I'll admit, the dog's got me second-guessing. Let's just hope you're right. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. She knew this wasn't just about her instincts, it was about Duke. The dog had been her partner for years, and he had a sense of things that couldn't be explained. If he was focused on this spot, then there was a reason. As the cutter finally broke through the thick concrete, a sharp, sudden crack echoed through the warehouse. The team paused, their eyes locked on the newly exposed surface. Beneath the concrete was a hollowed-out cavity, just large enough to hold something or someone. "Here we go," Shepard muttered under his breath. Moving forward as the cutter's final cut finished, Leila crouched down, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the space. It was dark underneath, the shadows heavy, but as the team moved closer, they could make out the faint outline of a large, sealed plastic bag. It was bulky and irregular, the shape of a body wrapped tightly within. "That's it," Leila whispered, almost to herself. She felt a wave of unease wash over her, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from the bag. Something about it felt wrong, too deliberate, too calculated. Shepard knelt next to her, his gaze flicking between the bag and her face. "So, what now? You think that's the body you've been smelling all along?" Leila nodded, her throat tight. "I think so, Detective." The team moved quickly to retrieve the bag, using careful hands to cut away the plastic. The stench hit them like a wall, the unmistakable smell of decay. It was overwhelming. The bag was heavy, and as they pulled it free, they revealed the remains of a man. His body was badly decomposed, but there was no mistaking the fact that this was a human corpse. "Jesus," Shepard muttered, looking away momentarily. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, his disgust evident. Leila stood back, her chest tightening as she processed the sight. This wasn't just an ordinary missing person. This wasn't an accident. The way the body had been hidden, intentionally, methodically, spoke to something more sinister. "We'll need a full forensic team here," Shepard said, his voice less skeptical now, more serious. "But I think we can all agree on one thing. This isn't a coincidence." Leila couldn't tear her eyes away from the remains. There were so many questions, but the most pressing one echoed in her mind. "Who is this man?" "Let's not jump to conclusions," Leila said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside. "We'll need to identify him first. But one thing's for sure. Someone wanted him to stay buried." The team gathered around, the next steps unfolding quickly. Forensics arrived shortly after, and the process of confirming the body's identity began. Leila stood with Duke, who hadn't moved from his spot, his watchful eyes scanning the scene. She felt a strange sense of satisfaction, the kind that only came when a case was finally starting to unravel. But deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. There were answers buried here, answers that would soon come to light. But the question was, would they be ready for the truth? The forensic team arrived swiftly, their equipment clattering into the warehouse with grim efficiency. Leila felt the weight of the moment press down on her chest. It was the kind of discovery that came with both relief and dread. They'd found a body, but there were so many unanswered questions left in its wake. As the forensic team began their work, Leila moved to the side, her mind racing. Shepard was nearby, watching the process unfold, though his earlier skepticism had melted away. His arms were folded, and his gaze was sharp, assessing the scene with a quiet intensity. "I didn't expect this," Shepard muttered, his voice tight. "I thought maybe a vagrant or someone who got caught up in the wrong crowd. But this is different." Leila nodded, her eyes fixed on the body as the forensic team carefully examined the remains. The stench of decay still clung to the air, but it was the chilling realization that they were dealing with a long-forgotten crime that settled in her stomach. The body was wrapped tightly in plastic, and there was something methodical about the way it had been concealed. It wasn't just a body. It was a secret buried deep, waiting to be uncovered. The forensic technician, a woman with sharp eyes and a steady hand, carefully unwrapped the plastic. The body inside was unrecognizable at first glance, but the details soon began to emerge. The man had been in his 40s or 50s, his face twisted in a grotesque expression of pain, the skin stretched tight over the skull. Leila looked away for a moment, her throat tightening at the horror before her, but she steeled herself, focusing on the task at hand. "Can you tell who this is yet?" Shepard asked, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of urgency. The technician worked quickly, flipping through a set of files as she took notes. We'll need to run a full autopsy, but based on the clothing and the watch, I'd say we're looking at someone of means. A businessman, maybe? Leila stepped forward, watching the technician with rapt attention. Do you think he was killed here? Hard to say, the technician replied, glancing up briefly. But the body's decomposition suggests he's been here for a while. The position of the body, though, it's almost like someone wanted him to stay hidden. Not just buried, but sealed away. Leila's mind started to churn with possibilities. The more she thought about it, the more the pieces seemed to fit. This wasn't just a random death. This was something far more calculated. Someone had gone to great lengths to keep this person's disappearance under wraps for a very long time. Shepard stepped closer, glancing at Leila. You think it could be Thomas Reeves? Leila didn't answer immediately. She knew the name. Thomas Reeves had been a businessman in the area, a prominent figure known for his dealings in the local real estate market. 12 years ago, he'd disappeared without a trace. There had been speculation about a financial collapse, about shady business deals and personal issues, but no one had ever found a body. His case had gone cold, and with it, the memory of his disappearance. It might be, Leila said slowly, her voice distant, but we can't make assumptions just yet. We need confirmation. The forensic team worked quickly, collecting evidence and documenting the scene. They took photos of the body, the clothing, and the watch. The watch was a unique custom design, one that only a few people in town would have recognized. It was expensive, high-end, the kind of accessory a businessman like Reeves would have worn. Leila turned to Shepard, her mind still racing. We'll need to check if Reeves had a custom watch like this. If we can confirm that, it'll give us a starting point. Shepard nodded, already pulling out his phone. I'll make a call to the old contacts. We'll get this confirmed. As he walked away, Leila stayed near the body, her thoughts still swirling. There was something else that kept gnawing at her. The way Duke had reacted earlier. The dog had been so sure, so focused. She couldn't shake the feeling that Duke knew more than they did, that he'd been the one to uncover a truth that had been hidden for far too long. Her thoughts were interrupted by a voice from the forensic team. Detective Cortez, you might want to take a look at this. Leila moved over quickly, her eyes scanning the scene as the technician held up a small, folded piece of paper. It was well preserved, tucked into the man's jacket pocket, as though someone had placed it there deliberately. She took the paper, unfolding it carefully. The handwriting was faint, but it was legible. The words read, "The truth lies beneath." Leila's heart skipped a beat. She looked up at the team, her mind racing. The message was clear. Someone had known where the body was, someone who might have been close to the victim or the killer.
Leila repeated quietly.
This could be a lead. The letter could be referring to someone involved in the disappearance. Shepard returned, his face grim. We've confirmed the watch belonged to Reeves. It's him. This is Thomas Reeves. Leila nodded, absorbing the weight of the confirmation. Thomas Reeves, the missing businessman, had been buried beneath the floor of that warehouse for 12 years. And now they had a killer to find. But the message in the pocket, R, was a clue. Someone with a name starting with R had been involved, and Leila was determined to follow that thread, no matter where it led. The truth was beginning to surface, but Leila knew this was only the beginning. The next steps would be crucial, and she would need all the answers she could get if she was going to bring justice to Thomas Reeves and his family. Let's get back to work, she said, her voice steady but filled with resolve. We've got a killer to catch. The morning after the discovery, the investigation had officially taken off. With Thomas Reeves' body confirmed and the mysterious letter pointing to someone with the initial R, Leila felt the weight of the case settling heavily on her shoulders. The thought that she might be stepping into a dark world of betrayal, fraud, and murder consumed her thoughts. Who could have done this, and why? Leila stood in the conference room, where the team had gathered to discuss the case. Detective Shepard was leaning over a table, his phone in hand, scribbling notes in his usual, no-nonsense manner. The air was thick with the intensity of the investigation. Each person in the room knowing that this case had the potential to crack open something much larger than they'd initially imagined. "I've gone through the financial records of Reeves' last known dealings," Shepard said, looking up from the paperwork. "It's pretty clear that his business partner, Howard Rohr, was at the center of most of his major transactions. Rohr's name keeps popping up everywhere. Suspicious deals, unaccounted transactions, and a suspiciously large bank transfer just weeks before Reeves vanished." Leila's eyes sharpened. She had heard of Howard Rohr, a shrewd businessman, known for his calculated rise to power in the local real estate market after Reeves' disappearance. He had become a prominent figure in the area, but no one had ever really questioned his sudden fortune. Now, with the letter pointing to someone with the initial R, Leila felt a gut feeling telling her that Rohr was somehow involved. "Rohr's involvement doesn't surprise me," Leila said, crossing her arms, her voice laced with determination. "But it doesn't mean we've got him. We still don't know if he's the one who killed Reeves." Shepard nodded. "That's where you're right. We don't have concrete proof yet. But we do have motive." He paused and flipped through the papers. Rohr and Reeves were partners in a large land development deal. But just before Reeves disappeared, Reeves found discrepancies in their accounts. Rohr had been siphoning off money, skimming from the projects they were working on. The fraud was massive. Leila's brow furrowed. A financial dispute that could have easily turned deadly if it came to light. "Exactly," Shepard replied. "And we know that Rohr had the most to gain from Reeves' disappearance. He'd have been left to take over the entire business." Leila felt a sudden rush of clarity. The financial motive was glaring, but there had to be more, something deeper that tied Rohr to the body found under the floor. She couldn't shake the feeling that the past 12 years had been building to this moment, and Rohr might not have been as careful as he thought. She picked up her phone, dialing a number from her list of contacts. "I need a full history on Howard Rohr. Background check, recent movements, anything you've got," she said firmly. As she hung up the phone, Shepard's voice broke through the silence. "So, we go after Rohr next." Leila's eyes met his, the weight of their unspoken understanding clear between them. "Yeah, but we can't just go in blind. We need to be sure he's involved before we make any moves. We don't want to scare him off." They spent the rest of the day gathering more information about Rohr's background, and the pieces started to fall into place. The more they learned, the more suspicious his actions seemed. Rohr's sudden wealth after Reeves' disappearance was one thing, but there were also reports of him using aggressive tactics to buy out smaller businesses and properties in the years following Reeves' vanishing. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about power, and Rohr was on a relentless path to claim it. Later that evening, Leila and Shepard stood outside Rohr's mansion, a sleek, modern structure nestled in the hills just outside town. The sprawling estate was a testament to his wealth, and as Leila looked up at the illuminated windows, she couldn't shake the feeling that behind those walls, there was a man hiding something far darker than his luxurious lifestyle suggested. "Ready for this?" Shepard asked, his voice calm but with a hint of excitement. Leila glanced over at him. "We're not here for small talk, Shepard. Let's just go in, get the answers we need, and get out." They rang the doorbell, and within moments, a butler opened the door. "Detective Cortez, Detective Shepard. Can I help you?" "We'd like to speak with Mr. Rohr," Leila said, her voice firm but polite. The butler hesitated, clearly assessing them for a moment before nodding. "Please come in. I'll notify Mr. Rohr." They were ushered inside, into a lavish foyer filled with expensive art and modern furnishings. The smell of fresh coffee lingered in the air, a stark contrast to the tension that seemed to hang in every corner of the house. Rohr entered the room, his sharp suit and perfectly combed hair giving him the appearance of someone who was always in control. But when his eyes met Leila's, she saw something else. Something guarded, something that hinted at fear, just beneath the surface. "Detectives," Rohr said, his voice smooth but with a hint of uncertainty. "What brings you to my home at this hour?" Leila didn't waste time with pleasantries. "We're here about Thomas Reeves." Rohr's expression flickered, but it was almost too quick to notice. Reeves? I thought we put that whole mess behind us. We're not here for that, Mr. Rohr, Shepard cut in. We're here because we found something you might want to explain. He glanced at Leila, who nodded in confirmation. Leila stepped forward, watching Rohr closely. Your business partner's been dead for 12 years, Mr. Rohr. We found his body, buried under a warehouse in West Ridge. And the strange thing is, we found a letter at the scene, signed with a letter R. Care to explain? Rohr's face grew pale, his mouth tightening into a thin line. His eyes darted around the room, his discomfort palpable. You can't possibly believe I had anything to do with that, he stammered, his voice cracking slightly. He was a difficult man, but I didn't kill him. I didn't. Leila's gaze never left him. We know about the financial fraud, Mr. Rohr. We know you were siphoning money from the business. And we know that your fortune grew considerably after Reeves disappeared. Do you really expect us to believe you had nothing to do with it? Rohr swallowed hard, his gaze flickering between the two detectives. Look, it wasn't like that. I didn't kill Thomas. He found out about the fraud and he confronted me. Panicked. But I never meant for it to go this far. I buried him because I didn't want anyone to find out about what we'd done. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Leila stepped closer, her voice cold. Then what happened, Mr. Rohr? You're saying this was just an accident. He lowered his head, and his voice dropped to a whisper. It wasn't an accident. We argued. I didn't mean to hit him so hard. But when he fell, I knew it was over. So I buried him. I had no choice. He was going to ruin everything. Leila's pulse quickened. This was it. Rohr had confessed. Shepard took a step back, signaling the butler to call for backup. Mr. Rohr, you're under arrest for the murder of Thomas Reeves and for fraud. The tension in the room was thick, but Leila felt a strange relief. The case was finally cracking open, and justice for Thomas Reeves was within their grasp. But as Rohr was led away in handcuffs, Leila couldn't help but feel that this was only the beginning of a much larger story, one that still had many twists left to reveal. The arrest of Howard Rohr sent ripples through the community, as news of his involvement in Thomas Reeves' murder spread quickly. For 12 years, Rohr had managed to operate under the radar, building his empire on the foundation of lies, deceit, and murder. His sudden arrest shocked many, especially those who had considered him a respectable businessman. But for Leila Cortez and her K-9 partner, Duke, the case was far from over. They had uncovered the truth, but there was still the question of justice, real justice, the kind that would put an end to years of silence. The days following Rohr's arrest were filled with legal proceedings, forensic analysis, and interviews. Leila and Shepard worked relentlessly, piecing together the final details of the case. Forensics confirmed that Reeves had died from blunt force trauma to the head, and additional evidence found at the scene, the fraud, the forged documents, painted a picture of a man who would stop at nothing to protect his wealth and power. But for Leila, the most important piece of the puzzle was always Duke. Duke had been the one to lead them to the body. His incredible instincts and unwavering focus had been the catalyst that set everything in motion. Without him, the truth might have remained buried forever, hidden under layers of concrete, lies, and time. As the trial date approached, Rohr's defense team tried everything they could to undermine the evidence. They claimed that Rohr had acted in a moment of panic, that Reeves had threatened him, that the killing had been an accident. But the jury wasn't fooled. The evidence was clear, and Rohr's actions after the murder, the way he meticulously buried the body and tried to erase all traces of it, spoke volumes about his guilt. On the day of the verdict, Leila stood in the back of the courtroom, her arms crossed, eyes fixed on the judge as he prepared to announce the decision. The room was filled with tension, every person waiting for the final word. Duke, as always, was by her side. He sat quietly on the floor, his head turned slightly as if he too knew the importance of the moment. The court has found the defendant, Howard Rohr, guilty of the murder of Thomas Reeves, the judge said, his voice booming through the silent room. Leila allowed herself a small sigh of relief. It was over. The man who had killed Reeves for financial gain, the man who had spent 12 years hiding the truth, was finally being held accountable for his actions. Roar's face, once confident and cold, had now turned pale as he was led away in handcuffs. He had fought until the very end, but the evidence had spoken for itself. Justice had been served, and though the years couldn't be undone, the pain of the past 12 years had finally found closure. Leila stepped outside the courthouse, the crisp air of the early evening filling her lungs. Shepard walked beside her, his usual stoic demeanor softened by a rare moment of satisfaction. "You did good, Cortez," he said quietly, his voice filled with respect. "You and Duke. This case wouldn't have been solved without him." Leila looked down at Duke, who was trotting beside her, his tail wagging lightly. "It wasn't just me," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "It was him. He knew. He always knows." Duke stopped for a moment, looking up at Leila with his deep, steady gaze. His eyes, filled with intelligence and loyalty, spoke volumes without a single word. Leila crouched down, running her hand over his head gently. "We make a good team, don't we, boy?" Shepard watched them for a moment before speaking again. I never thought much of the K9S before. Thought it was all just training. But seeing what Duke did, it's hard to argue with that kind of instinct. You two make a hell of a pair." Leila smiled, the weight of the case finally lifting from her shoulders. "I've never doubted him for a second." As they walked away from the courthouse, Leila's mind wandered back to the case. Roar was behind bars, and Thomas Reeves' family would finally get the closure they deserved. But there was something more, a sense of satisfaction that went beyond solving a case. For Leila, it was about the bond she shared with Duke, the unspoken trust between them that had brought them through countless cases. But there was another feeling too, something that wasn't quite finished. As they made their way down the street, Leila's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and glanced at the screen. It was an encrypted message from an anonymous tipster. The message read, "This wasn't the only thing Roar hid. There's more. You need to look deeper." Her heart skipped a beat. She looked at Duke, who had already stopped walking and was now staring off into the distance, as though he had sensed the change in the air. Leila stood still for a moment, her hand clenched around the phone. The case had been solved, but now, with this new message, she knew there was something else waiting. Something darker. Something even more dangerous. Shepard noticed her pause. "What is it?" Leila didn't answer right away. She just stood there, staring at the message on her phone, her mind already racing ahead to the next challenge. She felt the adrenaline rising once more, the familiar rush of uncertainty and anticipation. "I think," Leila said slowly, "this case is far from over." As she turned to head back to the station, the weight of the unknown pressing on her, Duke stayed close beside her, his silent presence a reminder that whatever was coming next, they would face it together, like they always did. And with that, they moved forward into the next chapter of their work, knowing that justice, while served, was a never-ending pursuit. This story sheds light on the power of intuition, teamwork, and justice. It shows how even the most difficult cases can be solved through persistence, loyalty, and the extraordinary skills of a K9 officer like Duke. It reminds us that truth, no matter how deeply buried, will always find its way to the surface, and that justice can be served even after years of silence. The story emphasizes the importance of trust, the human-animal bond, and the pursuit of justice. It speaks to the strength of compassion and determination, showing that even the most challenging obstacles can be overcome when we work together and believe in what's right. It's a reminder that every action, no matter how small, can make a profound difference. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this incredible story. Don't forget to like this video, leave your comments below, and share your emotions with us. Make sure to subscribe to our channel so you never miss another captivating story. Your interactions are a huge motivation for us to continue creating even better content. Thank you once again for joining us today. We appreciate your support and love. Until next time, stay tuned for more stories that will touch your heart and stir your soul.